Plays on enhanced dick, bitch!
Oh god, now I gotta make a video about something I'm even more passionate about than anything else I've done on this channel. Welcome back to Black Blaze Gaming, I guess. My name is Dakota, and you motherfuckers, you really thought you could shut me down by saying the word tourist at me a bunch of times? You self-important zoomers who've never had to blow on a cartridge to drown out the sound of your parents fighting in the background because daddy left when you were a fetus well after the fucking towers fell? I've been playing Metroid games since before your middle school classmates convinced you were transgender. I'm old enough to remember when bisexual propaganda was the status quo in middle school. Hell, I'm old enough to have been raised in an environment that made me resistant to bullshit like that. So I don't want to hear about your tourists and your grifters and the red paint all over your face that you vacuum slurped off the plumber's cock, okay? By the time Other M came out, I was old enough to vote and also old enough to know it wasn't worth my fucking time because people like you made up the majority by that point. My dad was already dead by the time that piece of shit slithered out of Sakamoto's acrid flaps. Do I still have the original Super Metroid manual floating around in my room somewhere? Yeah, probably, but I can't be bothered to pull it out to show a bunch of bootlicking Disney adult Bratz dolls who can't let go of their childhood why they should let their frontal lobe develop before they show up on my doorstep with a picket sign with slogans on it that a 2012 series scum slop tuber wouldn't fucking adopt. And if you're part of the tiny fraction of people trying to shut down concerns over Metroid Prime 4's content that is actually older than me, you can refer to my last big AAA takedown video for my coverage on how fucking worthless you are to the gaming discourse. Last thing I need is some Dark Side Phil looking ass coming in here telling me how his wife's son loves Doom the Dark Ages or Metroid Other M's fucking voice acting. My brother in Christ, they had Jennifer Hale in the original Prime series, and you think Other M's dry-ass, whiny bitch fucking Timu Samus was impressive? This is Olympic sport levels of dick riding to be part of the herd. The number of these people who shut down opposing opinions that talk about how, oh, we're the majority, it's a vocal minority of tourists who hate this game. It makes me really wonder about the state of brainwashing tech Nintendo stole from Nvidia. Under no circumstances should you give a fuck about how many fucking people agree with your opinions on a fucking video game. I don't care that I'm part of the tiny fraction of the populace who think Breath of the Wild was a brain-dead pile of shit, nor that I'm in the majority group of people who have functioning brains and realize Dark Souls 2 was the worst Souls game. Since you're so developmentally challenged from all the Red 40 and Adderall you huffed throughout your formative years, roughly a week ago for many of you, let me give you a quick breakdown on the history of my favorite game franchise. Metroid originally released in 1986 on the Famicom, 87 in North America on the NES, and then Europe had to wait like the little PAL standard bitches they've always been until 88. The sequel, Destroy All Metroids Because Why Have a Namesake When You Can Kill It, came out on Game Boy and made very little impact. But the king shit of Fuck Mountain came out in 94 on the SNES, Super fucking Metroid. This masterpiece was my introduction to our Ellen Ripley-inspired badass bitch and Ridley Scott as a Scaly. Upper Brinstar's theme is one of my favorite pieces of music ever composed, and I became a better gamer by stumbling around in Super Metroid's no-nonsense environmental storytelling and complete lack of training wheels. Since then, I've played every single game in the franchise except for two. The Metroid 2 Remake, because they shut down the excellent fan project of it, classic Nintendo, and Federation Force because I'm not a Neanderthal. I haven't played freshly picked Tingle's Rosy Rupee Land either, so call me a tourist all you want, but you look like a paid actor, without actually getting any bread. Metroid Prime was the best transition to 3D of any gaming franchise in history. Metroid Fusion is the scariest Game Boy Advance game ever made, Metroid Prime Hunters is the best multiplayer game on the DS, and Metroid Prime Pinball is one of the best spin-offs in gaming, falling just behind Pokemon Mystery Dungeon and Nier Automata. Metroid Prime 2 and 3 are also masterpieces, so don't even act like I'm ignoring them shits. Prime 3 is some of the best locales in the entire series, and Prime 2 is the first time we actually get to encounter Dark Samus in-game. Of course, she was revealed in the 100% ending for Prime 1, but you Fent fairies probably didn't know that. When Other M was announced, it was right around the time I was beginning to wonder if they were ever going to have proper voice acting for Samus or Link in any of their respective games. I was also a little concerned about Other M, given that Team Ninja was involved and, well, it wasn't going to be Prime 4. The lack of mention for Prime 4, which was teased at the end of Prime 3, or what I believed was the next portable console game, Project Dread, really irked me. I was excited to see if we really would see Silex again on a mainline game, and if they'd do a home console iteration on the excellent multiplayer from Prime Hunters. But it was hardly a big deal at first. You see, back then, there had never really been a bad Metroid game. The worst in the series was probably the second game, which tried to make a portable game function as a sequel to a home console game, and even then it was pretty solid. Granted, there were signs of trouble with Zero Mission's obnoxious hint system, but it was a minor thing. The thing that actually really concerned me about Other M's release was the lack of an analog stick for a 3D action game. That's elementary levels of stupid design. Even God of War 4 didn't make that mistake. Nintendo literally engineered a console's controller to demonstrate that D-pads were not the future of movement with the transition to 3D. But it was much, much worse than anyone could have dreamed it would be. A dumbed-down piece of shit action game with quick-time events, the most hand-holding gameplay systems ever, no new powers or abilities, and one of the worst, most insulting, garbage-tier, borderline sexist stories ever fucking penned with atrocious acting to boot, and regressive nostalgia-bait art design. And I'm not saying Sakamoto intended to be sexist or come off as sexist with his writing of Other M, but it's hard to ignore. Now, this game does have its defenders, but luckily they don't have a lot of internet access in the asylums they inhabit, so thank God for that, because even Nintendo had to admit it was AIDS, which is especially embarrassing after they tried to use its story to remove the Prime games from canon. It was so bad, in fact, that it effectively killed the franchise for a decade. Yeah, we got that mediocre remake and that laughably ridiculous cash grab spinoff, but no sequels and no clear future. There was the random announcement of Metroid Prime 4 during the Wii U era, but it wasn't even in conjunction with the very people who made the Prime games and teased a fourth one originally. They were going to give it to Bandai Namco Studios because that makes sense. To be fair, same director, but different team. Luckily, they scrapped whatever trash bin they were making and restarted development with Retro Studios after a couple of years, and here's where we get to one of the stupidest things that these monkeys cling to defend Metroid Prime 4, that Retro Studios hasn't fumbled in the past. Now, to be fair, I can't confirm or deny this claim, as I haven't played Donkey Kong Country Returns or its sequel. But I have two counterpoints here. First of all, I can confidently say that it is exceptionally unlikely that Donkey Kong Country Returns is even half as good as the original Donkey Kong Country series, and that it is a huge step backwards from Donkey Kong 64, which was a masterpiece, and I'm tired of pretending it isn't. The other counter I have is that Retro Studios is a meaningless term, like all company names. Why would you ever have loyalty to a logo? Many of the people who made the original Prime games likely don't work there anymore, and considering that the guy who functionally killed the franchise for a decade is still at Nintendo, it's likely he's got his bloodstained hands on this project too. And considering he also produced Dread, which was an underbaked project that took 19 years to come out at the indie studio quality it has, it's not the badge of honor it once was. Ultimately, it doesn't come down to a bunch of outsiders looking in going, I think that's dumb, so the whole game is dumb, and if you like it, you're dumb. I want Nintendo to fail. I want Metroid to die. Grrr. It's that so many of us so-called tourists are former fans or fans that have sort of backed away from Nintendo products in recent years due to their treatment of those properties and the people who loved them. I don't want this game to suck. I don't want it to fail just because I'm mad at Nintendo. I want them to make great games that respect the legacy of their franchises while still innovating on them. I want something new and interesting to play, not rehashed bullshit from decades past. I want to feel like I can call myself a Nintendo fan again. But yeah, if the games suck or they disrespect the legacy they hail from, I'm gonna call it out. And yes, I would want something like that to fail like Other M did, or Dragon Age the Veilguard. I don't wish ill upon the people who made those things, but the ironic thing is that while people call me a tourist for criticizing something I see, usually in a space I care about, the real tourists are many of the decision makers in charge of making these terrible follow-ups to once beloved IPs. How much does the showrunner for The Witcher talk about actively hating the source material, for example? Apparently all the fucking time. But you have these same bootlicking Nintendo stands get mad at the team behind Hogwarts Legacy because the original author is someone they find distasteful. Yet that team is not run by Just Kidding Rowling and made a decent game that showed a ton of respect for the source material. And you can hate the source material all you like, but if that's the case, you shouldn't be making adaptations of it. And you know what's really funny to me? Earlier this year, we got Doom the Dark Ages, and when that shit was announced, I said it would be shit, and there was no way I was going to buy it after what they did to Mick Gordon. Turns out, the game was a flop, selling less than even Doom 2016. The music, while trying its best, isn't Mick Gordon's, and the gameplay is a huge step backward. No matter how much people love it and actively turn a blind eye to the mistreatment of one of the greatest composers in modern music, it still failed like I knew it would, or at least hoped it would. Because yes, Marty Stratton is a shitheel and should never be able to find employment again. As it turns out, I have a ton of experience and knowledge about the games industry and about how people work. So when I see things like Miles McKenzie talking about working in a cubicle next to a dude named Phil in the fucking Metroid universe, yeah, I'm gonna see that as a red flag. Or how they gave the woman in power armor that lets her run at ridiculous speeds already a fucking motorcycle to traverse what appears to be a vast, empty desert. While these things don't necessarily sink the game prior to launch, they are red flags that are worth pointing out and discussing. Then you have more stuff coming out, like, look at these cool locales with some of the worst, most Pokemon-esque names I've ever seen. Fury Green, Volt Forge, Great Mines, Flare Pool, fucking Ice Belt. Remember how Metroid Prime had like bog standard environments and everyone picked on Retro for it? Like Jungle, Ice, and Fire, there they are. Well, at least they had interesting alien sounding names like Phendrana Drifts, Magmore Caverns, Phazon Mines, and Chozo Ruins. All of these are thematic and alien sounding, and the Prime series only got better at locales with time. Torvus Bog, Sanctuary Fortress, Skytown Elysia, Phase, Frigate Orpheon. Yeah, I'm sorry, it's not looking great. Usually a company will show the best parts of their game prior to release to spur sales, but if that's the case here, concern is certainly warranted because there are two main possibilities here. Either their marketing team is really fucking stupid and thinks these are the best selling points for this game, but the game itself might have better things going on that they aren't showing, or this really is the best they have to offer and the rest of the game is so much worse. But let's stop for a second. I'm just being a negative Nancy, right? Like, is there any upside at all? Do any of the previews look decent in any way? Well, here's where I have to disappoint you a little bit. I haven't watched every bit of Metroid Prime 4 content that's come out. I tend not to with franchises I care about. I want to go in blind, be surprised by what I find. Usually it's more about the atmosphere around the release of a game and the people who were involved. If it's still people that I trust, then I want to know that they're still around and making good decisions, but the content I want to see fresh with new eyes as soon as the game launches. And if there's been some drama around the creators of a franchise I care about, I want to see if they've actually fixed their shit or not. It's only really new IPs that need to sell me on their worlds and content before release, like Lies of P, Harvestella, Squirrel with a Gun, or Nightingale, all games that I was sold on by the previews and might not have known about without them. Hence why I watch things like E3 in the past, or TGA now. That said, I've seen a bit of the content of the previews to give you some positives I've noticed. The art direction looks mostly good. So far nothing stands out to me about the design concepts. It's mostly very safe looking compared to the really bold designs of Prime 2 or 3, but reasonably pretty. The motorcycle is an exception. That might be one of the most uninteresting and bland designs I've seen in a Metroid game, and frankly, I'm trying to picture why the Chozo race would design a motorcycle for Samus that completely defies the design language of everything else they've built, and doesn't seem to really fit with her other tools. Like, this is a race of people that mastered interstellar travel long before anyone else and built Samus a spaceship and power armor that could tank nuclear blasts and cosmic radiation. But they didn't build that motorcycle into the ship? They used extremely human design concepts and made this thing run around on wheels despite the fact that they've developed anti-gravity tech, jetpacks, and once again, power armor that has the capability to make its operator run at speeds fast enough to smash through solid metal walls and also fly indefinitely. That aside, the music also sounds decent so far. Hard to say for sure if it will have the same impact as something like Phendrana Drifts, the menu theme from Prime 1, Torvus Bog, or Skytown Elysia, but I've liked what little I've heard of it so far. And even amongst the two things I can praise about this game from the previews, I'm reminded of another red flag: the scale. In Prime 3, I finally felt like we were moving forward with the formula of the Metroid franchise, as we were able to control Samus's ship and fly to multiple planets as part of the game's progression. That, to me, felt like a natural step forward in this franchise. But once again, we're reduced to one planet. Of course, they might be really massive, but in terms of the sense of scale multiple planets gives you, lore-wise and gameplay-wise, along with being able to somewhat use Samus's ship for the first time in series history, it's still going to feel like a step backwards from Prime 3. So, at the end of the day, no, I'm not out here on the sidelines hating, hoping this game crashes and burns. I want it to be good. Not just that, I want it to be good, maintain the spirit of the Metroid franchise, and sell really well. So maybe Nintendo will continue letting passionate, talented people make great Metroid games instead of shitting all over my favorite franchise. Because having a bad game that nobody with properly functioning cortexes actually likes is bad enough. But it's not the worst fate a franchise could suffer. Because if a game that sucks comes out and it totally ruins the entire spirit of its namesake, but gets widely praised, that shit kills a franchise much more completely than it just not getting any sequels for a bit. At least in the case of these big budget IPs from giants like Nintendo. Genuinely ask yourself what's worse, seeing someone you love die, their soul intact, or watching them become a worse and worse version of themselves over time and being constantly reminded that they used to be someone you looked up to. For me, it's the latter, and it's the reason I don't call myself a fan of Nintendo, Pokemon, or Zelda anymore. My love for what they once were will always remain, but hidden in the ever-present shadow of what they've become looming overhead.
Woo.